Okay, so what if a law, one that was written way back in the 19th century, literally treated a wife as her husband's property? Well, for 158 years, that was the reality in India, under its law on adultery. Today, we're going to break down the dramatic legal battle that finally struck it down, and, the whole new debate it's kicked off about where the state really belongs, in our laws or in our bedrooms.
And this question really is what this whole story is about. It's a question of equality, of partnership, and of course, individual rights. And for more than 100 years, the law in India had a very, very specific and incredibly controversial answer to it.
To really get just how controversial this law was, we've got to go way back, all the way back to 1860, during British colonial rule, when this thing called Section 497 was first written into the Indian Penal Code.
Now, the wording here is absolutely critical. See, the law didn't see adultery as a betrayal between two partners. No, it saw it as a crime committed by one man against another man. It was basically like trespassing on the husband's property.
This slide really breaks down the, truly bizarre logic of the law. Just look at the power dynamics. Only the husband A, could even file a complaint. The only person who could get punished was the other man, man C. And what about the woman, wife B? Well, in the eyes of the law, she wasn't a criminal. She wasn't even considered a victim. She was just the object of the crime.
And the thinking behind this? Oh, it gets even more outdated when you look closer. The woman was completely exempt from any punishment at all. But here's the most telling part. If the husband was okay with it, if he consented to his wife's relationship with another man, then legally, no crime even happened.
So, what this all boils down to is pretty simple. The law was never really about protecting the sanctity of marriage. Not at all. It was about protecting a husband's exclusive ownership rights over his wife. It legally defined women as chattel, property, and that reinforced a hierarchy that just has no place in a modern democracy.
So, you've got this deeply archaic law just sitting on the books for decades and decades. But as India changed, the pressure to challenge it just grew and grew, setting the stage for a massive constitutional showdown. The final challenge came in the form of a lawsuit filed by a man named Joseph Shine, and his argument was powerful. He said that Section 497 wasn't just some old, unfair law, it was fundamentally unconstitutional. It was a direct attack on the core principles of modern India. The argument was basically that this one law shattered some of India's most fundamental rights. It violated Article 14, the promise that everyone is equal before the law. It broke Article 15, which forbids discrimination based on gender, and it totally trampled on Article 21, the right to life, which the courts have said also includes the right to live with dignity, to make your own choices, and to have privacy.
But man, this was not an easy fight. As you can see from this timeline, the Supreme Court had actually upheld this law before. Back in 1954 and then again in 1985, the court said the law was perfectly valid. It literally took until 2018 for the court to finally re-examine and overturn this long-standing precedent.
And that, of course, brings us to the moment everything changed. After decades of challenges and intense debate, the Supreme Court was finally ready to deliver its historic verdict. Just think about that number. For 158 years, this single section of the Penal Code had stood firm, reflecting a Victorian-era morality that saw women as beneath men. A century and a half of legal history was about to be completely rewritten. So on that day in 2018, a 5-judge constitutional bench delivered a unanimous verdict. It was powerful, it was decisive. They struck down Section 497, declaring it unconstitutional and erasing it from the law books for good. And this one quote from the Chief Justice at the time, "Husband is not the master of the wife." It just perfectly captures the huge shift in thinking. See, the court didn't just strike down a law. It rejected the entire patriarchal foundation it was built on. It affirmed a woman's individual dignity and her status as a totally equal partner.
So, the criminal law was gone. But what did that mean for adultery itself? Did it just disappear as a legal concept? Well, not exactly.
The judgment made this really crucial distinction. Adultery was no longer a criminal offense, something the state could prosecute you for and throw you in jail for. Instead, it became a civil wrong, a private matter between a couple, something to be handled in family court.
So the key takeaway here is that while you can't be sent to jail for adultery anymore, that doesn't mean it has zero legal consequences. The court was very clear.
It's still a serious breach of marital trust, and it's still a valid, gender-neutral reason for either spouse to file for a divorce.
But, just when you think the story's over, a whole new chapter begins. The debate around adultery in India is far from settled, and now there's actually a push to bring it back into the criminal code.
Yeah, recently a parliamentary committee that was reviewing India's new penal codes suggested that adultery should be a crime again. Their argument is that it's necessary to protect the institution of marriage, but their proposal comes with a very, very significant twist. This new proposal suggests making the crime of adultery completely gender-neutral. That would mean both the man and the woman involved could be punished equally. And the stated goal this time isn't about protecting a husband's property, but about safeguarding the sanctity of marriage as a social institution.
And this brings us right back to square one, to that central dilemma. After a huge landmark judgment that was all about individual autonomy and privacy, this new proposal reopens a fundamental question. What is the proper role of criminal law in the most personal parts of our lives? Should the state act as a guardian of marriage, or should it just stay out of the bedroom? That is the debate that's happening right now.